Hey guys, so on this one I wanted to talk a little bit about cholesterol. There's just a massive amount of misinformation about cholesterol out there, and a lot of people sort of cringe when they hear the word cholesterol because they think there's so many negative associations with it. You immediately think, oh, I'm going to eat this meal full of cholesterol and I'm going to die from a heart attack right afterwards. You know, when they'll have an egg and steak sandwich, and people are like, oh, that's just a heart attack in between two buns. And that's simply not the case. Cholesterol doesn't work like that. Cholesterol is actually a repair substance, and your body will actually produce cholesterol regardless of your dietary intake. It's actually doesn't really transfer through your blood into your digestive system like that. So you really don't have to worry about your consumption of cholesterol. You can be worried about your actual blood cholesterol, but again, that's semantic. It's really not something to worry about. There's enough research out there, and if you actually look at all of the research and the data, there's just as many people dying from heart disease with high cholesterol as there are with people with low cholesterol. So it's actually a terrible predictor, and you're much more inclined to follow the level of triglycerides and the ratio of your HDL to the total cholesterol in your blood. But there's just so much misinformation, and people hear terms like HDL and LDL, and yes, those two things are very relevant and have some mild predictors, but they're not going to be critical in your overall health. You much more want to get your triglycerides low, and people who have high triglycerides is actually from consuming too many carbohydrates. And a lot of people who end up eating high fat, low carb end up lowering their cholesterol and raising their HDL. So the actual risk factor for heart disease actually decreases with increased consumption of cholesterol and fat, which doesn't sound like it should make sense, but that's ends up happening basically because cholesterol is actually an anti-inflammatory, and it actually protects your system. Your body is literally, when your body produces cholesterol, again, regardless of how much you consume, your body's going to produce the amount of cholesterol your body needs to protect itself, because cholesterol is actually a protective mechanism. So if you are eating inflammatory foods, if you're smoking, if you're damaging your veins and arteries, your body will produce cholesterol, and it basically patches up those damaged areas within your circulatory system. And if those walls continuously get damaged over and over and over again, your body's going to keep sending the repair guys, to those spots, and eventually that's where you get the buildup. So it's not from the cholesterol itself, it's the repair. So that's why it's sort of like, there's a classic analogy: do you blame the fireman for showing up at the fire? Every time there's a fire, you find firemen. So do you blame the fireman? No, you blame the cause of the fire. What caused the fire to make the firemen go to the fire? And as it turns out, one of the main causes of those fires is your inflammation. So if you really want to protect your health, not get heart disease. I mean, heart disease is one of the number one killers these days, so you want to obviously mitigate that risk. You want to remove inflammatory foods from your diet. And one of the biggest sources of inflammatory foods in people's diets these days is processed carbohydrates and sugar. So it goes full circle with the optimal nutrition perspective, and paleo and keto is reducing those carbohydrates. The processed carbohydrates, they're really just not doing anything good for you. They might taste good, but they're seriously compromising your health. So bottom line, don't worry about your cholesterol consumption. You might want to monitor your numbers just to see where they are, but again, the risk factor is just very low. You don't really have to worry about cholesterol. It's mostly, you've got to worry more about the sugar than the cholesterol. Thanks.